This is Byron O'Neal for Comic Book Yeti, sitting down today with writer David Booher to talk about his new Image comic release, Rain. Thanks for joining me today, David.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so excited to be on the show.
So, I live in Florida. We know a good hard rainstorm, but this is a whole nother level. So, tell me a little bit about Rain.
Well, Rain is a love story set during a unique apocalypse. It's about Honeysuckle Speck and her girlfriend, Yolanda Rusted, and they're moving in together in Boulder, Colorado on this beautiful sunny August day, and they're about to start their lives together. And when we enter the story, it's about they talk about their coming out process, and it's we see the bond between the two of them, and it really seems like it's the best day of their lives. And then the dark clouds roll in, and when the skies open, instead of raining down water, it rains down crystal nails about the size of your thumb. And 8,000 people across Boulder are killed in about 8 minutes. And I won't say anything else because it's a spoiler, but the plans that they all laid out in this spreading apocalypse are shredded, just like the victims who are out in the rain. And the story becomes one about love and loss and grief and how we carry those things and how we move on when there doesn't seem to be much to push ahead for.
Well, this is a bit of a departure from creating your own universe of comics as you have in the past. So this was originally a novella from Joe Hill's book, Strange Weather. So how did that collaboration with Joe come about?
I've been a Joe Hill fan for a very, very long time, ever since he, I think, started out writing. I still have on my shelf, his first book was 20th Century Ghosts, and it was a short story collection. And there's a mass market hardcover that was published in the US. And I think it was, I want to say 2008. I got a copy of it. It's this beautiful, like cloth bound with a paste down cover. And it's just great. And I bought a copy at the LA Times Festival of Books. And Joe happened to be there as a guest. And in 2008, I brought this book to him, and he signed it, and I still have it on my shelf. And it's, one of my just prized possessions in my collection. So I've just read everything that's come out. Lock and Key, for me, is my favorite comic of all time. And Joe created with Gabriel Rodriguez. And I came to comics as an adult. So right around the time, about 2008, 2009, is when I started sort of diving into comics. And Lock and Key was the first one I read. I'd read some before that, but it was the first one I read that really showed me what kind of storytelling is possible in the comics format. And, I've since read Watchmen, and I just read V for Vendetta, and I've read, what is the Batman Year One or something, the famous one, and a lot of other books that I know came before Lock and Key that had a similar type of thing. Like Watchmen is, how do you tell the story in comics? And it just sort of blew the doors open on what's possible. But for me, Lock and Key was the one that opened my eyes, and it's my favorite comic of all time. So I have this deep admiration for Joe. And I read Strange Weather, and I read Rain as the story. And I just was so taken by the story and the characters. I just was, I loved it so much. And I thought this story could live in another medium, movie, TV show, comic. And so I started putting some feelers out, and somebody I'd worked with was Chris Ryle. And Rain is now the first book from Chris Ryle and Ashley Wood's new imprint at Image called Syzygy Publishing. And I know Chris was the editor on Lock and Key, still is good friends with Joe. And so I reached out. I said, Chris, is there any possibility that this could happen, that we could adapt Rain into a comic? And he said, well, let's see. So he was up for it. And, we talked with Joe. Joe read some of my other stuff. He liked that. I put together a pitch for how I wanted to adapt it to a comic. And I think he saw the pitch, and that's when he got on board, and he's like, yeah, let's try it. And then I wrote the first issue script, and I think that's when it really clicked for all of us. It's like we all were able to visualize what it could be, and I think, and that's, we're all really excited about it. And then Zoe Thorogood, who's the artist on it, on Rain, we were able to bring her on as the team in it. She created such a unique feel for the book that I think there was a little bit of kind of alchemy going on by when we started seeing the art, and we were all thrilled about it. So that's kind of the origin of it. I would say anybody who's listening who is a writer out there, don't, you got, I always say this, you got to take your shot. You got to take a shot. I didn't know if he was going to be into it or if he was going to trust me with an adaptation or anything, but I was so passionate about the story and I was such a big fan of Joe's that I thought, let's give it a shot. And here we are. So
how much creative license were you given for the adaptation?
Joe was really great. He had his story as the novella, and he understands adaptations with some of, Lock and Key was adapted to a TV show.
Yep.
Nosferatu was adapted to a TV show. Horns was a movie. And so he has a lot of experience with adaptations. So he was very, he gave us a lot of freedom to kind of, when you do an adaptation, you have to embrace the medium that you're working in. And there are some things in the story that won't make it into the comic. And there are some things in the comic that were added from the story. But I think that's because we were trying to make the best comic version of the story that we could. So Joe understands that. And he sort of let us go, let us have that freedom to create a version of the story that would maximize the comic medium.
So is it easier to write your own original story or adapt somebody else's?
That's a good question. They're so different. I think it's kind of a challenge to create your own from scratch. At least I had a blueprint. So I have my copy of Strange Weather at home. It's got like Post-it note tabs in it, and it's highlighted, and there's writing and all kinds of other stuff. But it was the template for me to go from there to adopt it. So there's a lot more pressure with an adaptation rather than your own work. But I think it was a little easier in the sense that I had the roadmap, and sort of how we got there was the fun part for me.
Well, I know you did a lot of research for the project. Clearly, you're a fan of Joe's. I used to actually live in Colorado, so I'm curious if you have any insight into the use of Boulder as a location, because the rain kills a lot of people. It's fairly uncommon there in Colorado. So does Joe hate the Nuggets or something, or?
The whole Nuggets, the whole team was caught outside. I don't know what the origin is for setting it in Boulder, Colorado.
Okay.
I was very fortuitous for me. My husband's family lives in Boulder.
Okay.
So I've been able to visit many times and see the layout. So I was familiar from being there, and then I looked at maps and sort of aerials and that sort of thing to see what it would. You see what it, what the layout would be. I don't want to give away too much of the story, but
sure.
What the layout would be. So I felt very fortunate. I don't know what the origin is. Joe probably has he's so full of fun stories. So he probably has a story as to why it's set particularly in Boulder.
Well, lots of the heavy lifting for the world building elements are already done for you. So talk to me about creating those moments of like the visual nuances that would be so important as you move from like this medium of essentially your mind into one of panels.
Well, a couple of things. One is the Boulder is such a great setting because you can put the Flatirons in the background, and it's like there's the beautiful views, right? And that just enhances the sort of tragedy of it all. Again, I don't want to spoil it. So it sort of enhances the tragedy of it all when you see this beautiful setting, beautiful blue skies, and the rain comes in and sort of turns it into tragedy. As far as, I'm a big fan of using page turns in panel transitions for cliffhangers and that sort of thing. And so it was deconstructing the story that was, divided into chapters, which have their own cliffhangers. But in comics, it's kind of like you have more limited space. It's like the first chapter can't necessarily. I think this first issue might actually be the first chapter in the novella, but there's certainly a lot less information in the comic than there is in the book, and that's just due to the medium. So yeah, visually, that's sort of, I had a picture of, there was a couple of key descriptions for the characters in the book that I put into the comic script, and Zoe translated into the visuals for the characters, and that was a lot of fun to see what I had in my brain, and then seeing Zoe's style onto it, and seeing these beautiful characters just come to life.
Well, after reading the first issue this week, I was struck by how much this feels more like a love story than something externalized like this crystallized rain. So I'm certainly bought into the relationship as Honeysuckle as a character. So this is a 5-issue arc. Is it a love story?
It is a love story. And I like to say it's a love story set during the apocalypse, not necessarily apocalyptic story about, with love between these two women. So that was my way into the story, and that's what I took from when I read the novella. Was this is a love story? It felt so much to me like Bird Box, which is a story about being a parent, being a mother, and what you do for your kids, and A Quiet Place, which is about family and how there is strength in family at the end of the world. And this is what that's what struck me about this story, is it's truly a love story. It's a story about grief and loss. And the unique layer to it is this apocalyptic rain that starts spreading across the world. And it's like, to me, it's more, somebody wrote it in a review, and I thought it was really on point, which they said, this crystal rain could be really like a B horror movie. Oh, we open on the crystal rain and it just like shreds everything and everybody, and suddenly you're following the characters, a la Night of the Living Dead or something, or Walking Dead, where you have the characters and you follow them through this apocalypse, right? I knew that this story the way into the story was the love between these two women, and how that endures when this happens. So I knew that it wasn't going to be, the focus wasn't necessarily going to be the apocalypse. And that's why I love the story so much.
So who is the target audience for Rain?
I think it's, that's a good question, because it's kind of everybody.
Right. Yeah.
It's everybody. If you like apocalyptic stories, there will be, the apocalypse is happening. If you like character-driven stories, that's going to be the focus of this journey. And I think audiences are changing. I mean, audiences' sensibilities are changing, so they're demanding. They want more than just crystal needles falling from the sky. So, I mean, some people like that, and that's fine. This book may not be for them, but for me, this is the Bird Box. This is the Arrival, which is about aliens, but it's not. It's so much more than that, and that's what really elevates these genre stories to something that I hope will be lasting and really will connect with people far beyond the weird apocalypse that we see in the story.
So you've touched a little bit on Zoe. How did the rest of the creative team get together?
Chris Ryle is the captain of our ship, so he was the one who came up with Zoe. I read her issue of Haha, and I saw some, and I read The Impending Blindness of Billy Scott, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. So she was on our radar, and Chris said, "Why not her?" And I was totally on board. So permission to speak freely.
Yes.
You see comics come out and you just see the same thing over and over again. I know it's different stories and I know it's different artists, but it kind of feels a lot of the same and feels very monotonous. Zoe felt like a breath of fresh air to me. Her style is very different. And I had a hunch. My gut told me that she's the kind of artist that people would notice. And so when Chris suggested her, I was great. Chris has worked with Chris O'Halloran on colors before, and Sean Lee on letters. So he brought them in, and as soon as Chris did the colors, we knew it was exactly right, because he did those sort of flat colors but super bright palette, and it just feels. And then, you know, it changes as the mood changes in the first issue, and he felt like he internalized what we were going for, and it just came out onto the page perfectly. So he's such an invaluable part of the team. And then Sean did the bubbles, or the dialogue bubbles without borders on them, which I thought was a really clever device. And it just all came together. And you know, kudos to Chris Ryle for bringing this team together. And it's just been so fun to sort of do my job of the writing the scripts, and then getting that art in my inbox. It's just nothing quite compares to that.
Yeah, that's got to be quite the gift.
Oh yeah, you see pages come in and you're just like, whoa, this is so far beyond anything that I had pictured. Envisioned. I've
been following Zoe on Twitter with the release of this book. Saw a picture of her picking up a physical copy, her first physical copy of a major comic work, you know, in your hands with Rain. And having a few projects under your belt now, does it always still feel like your first time when you see your work in that physical form?
It's equal parts exciting and terrifying, right? You'd think it would get easier, but it doesn't at all. It's fantastic to get that physical copy always in your hands and see it out in the world. And you know, for Rain has been really great. I think the feedback has been really terrific, better than we had anticipated. We thought we had a hunch people would like it, but we didn't. I don't think any of us realized how like viscerally people would respond to it. Even though it's kind of a emotionally kind of brutal first issue, and feels like people wanted to feel things, and they felt things after they read this. So when I can sit back and I can breathe that little sigh of relief that it's not going to be DOA, you know, I just really it feels sort of new every time, and I love it. And I will keep doing it. And sometimes you'll have comics that'll be here, sometimes you'll have some that'll be here, hopefully none down here, but you never know. But it's always that thrill of being able to put a new story out there and bring new readers on board, expand the folks that I know and who want to read my stuff, and just, it's always so exciting and thrilling and terrifying and all the things mixed up into one.
That's a lot emotionally to take in.
Oh my gosh. So anybody who's read Rain and felt all those emotions that you feel about it, just multiply that by 10. And that's how I feel about creating it.
So you said you got into comics when you were a little bit older. So when did you know you wanted to be a comics writer? I can't imagine you had an epiphany in law school.
Well, you know, I was at a big law firm after I graduated law school, and this was like the mid 2000s, and you know, I just wasn't enjoying it. And I had written some in college. I was always creative, and I wrote a little in college just for myself as a creative outlet. And I started exploring it when I was sort of working professionally as sort of escapism. Like, maybe I can do this for a living. And this was, of course, what is that? 15 years ago now, 2006, 2007, it's like 15 years ago. And so I started writing, and I wrote a novel that was just terrible. And then I wrote a second one that was just terrible, but a little bit better. And then I wrote a third one that was just like still terrible, but just a little bit better. It's like, okay, I can finish stories. And so I started looking into like writing for movies, writing screenplays. And I went through a program at UCLA called the Professional Program in Screenwriting. And so I got trained through that, and I got a whole lot better from there. And this is about the same time that I started getting into comics. And so I started looking at comics, and I thought, well, maybe this is really interesting. I wonder if I could do this. And so that's when I started writing comics, and I pitched an idea that I had to what would become Vault Comics. Mm-hmm. So they were just starting out, and I pitched them an idea, and they weren't even Vault yet. they were another kind of named publisher, and they were just looking at starting single issue comics. And so it all hit that sweet spot, and they're like, yeah, we love this idea. Let's develop it. Let's put it out. And that was my first opportunity. And, it was a really great story we all loved. It didn't sell very well, but it got me my next thing, which was another Vault book. And then from there, I started meeting some artists and other folks in the comics industry, and very, very early on. And that's when I met Drew Zucker, who was the artist and my co-creator on Kanto. And it was, so the first Vault book was 2017, and my second Vault book was 2017 to 2018. And I first met Drew in the fall of 2017. And that's when we started developing Kanto. And that came out in 2019. So that was sort of my trajectory.
Well, I'm a huge fan of Kanto. I think you and Drew have something special going on with that project. Now, as I understand it, it's being adapted into a film. So how are you feeling about getting that project with more wings?
I'm so excited. I can't wait to see it. I already have, Drew and I have had the very good fortune to be executive producers on it. And I'm going to be writing the screenplay. So I already have a sense in my head about how that story, the best version of that story as a movie. And I just can't wait to get all those emotions from the book onto the screen and really evoke those things, but on a much grander scale with a lot more eyeballs on it. So I really can't wait to see its next life, and it's our little Clockwork Knight's next iteration of his journey on probably the small streaming screen.
Well, you've written such a wide gamut of different things from a genre perspective, right? So there's Kanto, Rain, Killer Queens, Firefly adaptation, Alien Bounty Hunter. They don't seem like they have a lot in common, so it's hard mentally to kind of pin you into a category. Do you enjoy that creative freedom so far of not really having a niche?
Yeah, I'm very wily. I don't know. I don't know. So I think about that a lot, because I think about, should I just be doing all ages fantasy? Should I just be doing, big queer sci-fi? Should I just be doing, horror like in Rain? What should I be focusing on one thing? And there's a through line to all of these stories, which I tell everybody, and it's my number one piece of advice for anybody who wants to write stories or wants to make comics or anything, is to do what you love and do what you're passionate about, because these things take a very long time. If you're not passionate about it, you'll run out of fuel as you go. Kanto, I loved the story, loved the character so much that Drew and I knew that if IDW didn't take it, if any other publisher didn't take it, we would be doing crowdfunding, Kickstarter, whatever, because we wanted to tell this story. Killer Queens, I wanted to do a story about representation, and I love retrofuturism, and I love comedy, and I was so passionate about these characters. I wanted to tell this story. Same with Rain. We talked about it when I read it in 2017. I loved it so much. I wanted to tell the story. So if there's one common thing about all these different types of stories, it's that I love them, and I would pursue them to the ends of the earth to get them written. So I think what readers can expect from me in the future is that I'll probably be in different genres, doing all kinds of different things. But the one thing that you can count on is that I will be just head over heels in love, passionate about whatever story that I'm doing.
So are there future plans to work with the Joe Hill, his imprint? There's Hill House. Now you have, I'm going to butcher this, right? But Syzygy, did I get that right?
You got it right.
Yes.
Chris is going to be so happy.
Nice. Okay. Syzygy. There we go. We'll say it again.
Syzygy.
Yes.
Yep.
So any plans anyway to work with either of those imprints in the future?
Yes, I think all of us together have very high hopes that we're going to find an opportunity to do something more, either with Chris's Syzygy imprint at Image, or with, Hill House over at DC, or so. I mean, I can tell you from I can't, speak for them, but I can tell you from my perspective and what it seems to be to me is that we've worked really well together as a team, and I really, look forward to the opportunity with the right story to do something else together. I think we will.
So if you could write an arc for any major comic book character, who would it be and why? I
would have said Firefly. To be honest with you, Firefly is my favorite sci-fi franchise, and I love the show so much. And I pursued it. I pursued it with Boom. I ended up, knowing my editor over there, and I brought it up with her, and things came to pass. And then I got the opportunity. So I would say Firefly, but something that I haven't, that I would like to. I hate to even say this publicly, but I'm not a reader of the big two. I will cherry pick some different things from Marvel and DC that I think are really interesting, but I'm just not like a Wednesday warrior. Let me read 15 Batman books or whatever.
I can't do it either.
So maybe that'll kill me as far as, making the leap to the big two, but I would love to do like a DC Black Label or some sort of Marvel, out of continuity. I think the X-Men are really cool. I'm always drawn toward Nightcrawler because, it's an allegory for the LGBTQ community.
Sure.
And, it's always fascinating me with the mutants that can't pass. So Nightcrawler is the perfect example. Is he'll never pass as human. Everybody's going to know he's a mutant. So I want to tell a one-off out of continuity. I don't care what happened in the X-Men before. I don't care what's going to happen in the future. I just want to tell like a 10-issue 1940s noir-esque story about religion and beliefs and Catholicism and Nightcrawler and how he fits into a small town, and how he navigates, and maybe set it against like a murder mystery or something like that.
That sounds amazing.
I think it'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Like a 10-issue. I already have like a cover in mind and everything, but that's what I would want to do, is write a Nightcrawler as an example of a do the Tom King sort of what he did with Vision and Mr. Miracle and those sorts of things, and just take that character and just sort of do my own thing. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but
we'll make it happen.
I mean, Marvel, my email's out there, so
there we go. Any future projects you want to hype before we go today? I mean, you have screenwriter chops, so would you like to move into another medium even down the road?
Yeah, so I already work in screenwriting. There's a lot of things that I'm working on that we're a little too early in the process to really talk too much about.
Sure.
But Canto is coming. I'll look for more news on Killer Queens. Again, we're a little early in the process, but there's a couple really great bits of news about that story that, it's going to be moving forward. So I can't wait to release that. Then this year, which is already out there, Firefly, all new Firefly #1 starts in February. And this is in the current continuity of Firefly. They're ending at issue 36, and they're starting all new Firefly at #1. And I'm going to be writing that through 11 issues through the rest of the year. And then, Canto, we've been teasing it. We're going to do a Canto mini 2-issue miniseries in June and July. And then Canto 4, which is the wrap up of Canto's big story, is going to start in October. We've got a couple of Canto trades coming out this year. Killer Queens trade, the Rain hardcover is going to come in mid-year, I think, maybe in the fall. So there's a number of things that are percolating for 22. So I would recommend, if everybody wants to follow my social medias, I will be screaming them from the rooftops. I promise you.
Until you're tired of it, yes.
Until you're tired of it.
Such as marketing in this era.
I know, It's promotion, relentless promotion.
Yes. Well, my last question of the day. I'm a dog person. Clearly you are as well, since every bio everywhere talks about your greyhounds. Are you looking?
Can I move my screen a little bit?
Sure, absolutely.
Let me see if I can get my greyhound in there. There he
There
is.
it is. Nice.
Just out like a light.
So are we going to see a story with them in it? If you don't want, if there's no story, then you can just brag about your puppies, because I'm cool with that.
I'll say two things about it. And it's funny you asked that question because I never thought about it until right now. But there's one story that I'm actually pitching that is based on, we've had retired racing greyhounds for almost 20 years now.
Okay.
And the beautiful dogs that are raced. And then for a long time, it's better now, but for a long time, they were just sort of tossed aside. And we've had greyhounds for 20 years, and they're just the sweetest, nicest dogs. And so there is a story that I'm working on where I'm pitching the way into the story as my experience taking these dogs that would normally be discarded and saving them and finding such fulfillment and such joy and such connection to these animals. And it's a fantasy story, but it's kind of got that vibe to it. And then Drew Zucker and I on Canto are talking about a story that may be inspired by our love of dogs.
Yes.
So
sweet.
It's going to be another all ages fantasy that it's a ways down the road, but it's been percolating.
You heard it here first, because I asked about your dogs. Ta-da!
Yeah. Thank you for that. What a great final question.
Oh, no problem. We've adopted 4, so we're big dog people. So
good.
Thank you so much today, David, for joining me today. I appreciate you taking the time to visit with us at Comic Book Yeti. So,
it's my pleasure. So excited to be on here.
The first issue of your new comic reign is available now in local comic book shops or digitally online. On behalf of all of us at Comic Book Yeti, this is Byron O'Neal, and thanks for everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us today on Comic Book Yeti's Creator Chat series. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Make sure to check out our new comics podcast, Into the Comics Cave, a different take on comics interviews, wherever you get your podcasts.